ladies, gentlemen, and everything in between. Today, I'm going to be creating every single UFC pay-per-view still left in the year. I know I did a video similar to this, but that was quite a while ago, so I thought, you know what, I'll come back, I'll redo it all. Just before we get into it, I would recommend watching the video on 2x speed, because it's probably better to listen to me yap on for about 5 minutes than it is for 10. But yeah, also it helps me with retention. So yeah, let's get straight into it. The first card that hasn't been fully match made, UFC 305. Obviously we've got the main event, Dricus du Plessis versus Israel Adesanya. In the co-main event, I think they should do Alexander Volkanovski versus Aljamain Sterling. I think that it's like, I don't know if it's confirmed or just rumoured that Sterling is going to be fighting Movsar Evloev on UFC 307, but I've actually got Movsar fighting someone else. I think this fight makes a lot more sense as well. It's a lot more marketable. You've got a former featherweight champion versus a former bantamweight champion. Plus, you could argue they're the greatest of all time in their divisions. But yeah, for the featured fight of the night, I've gone for Jamal Hill versus Carlos Ulberg. Was supposed to happen on UFC 303, but I think it should happen here. And then Gamrot and Hook has been confirmed, and yeah, so also Tuivasa and Rosenstrike and Kara France and Usyk. But out of the two fights that I've added, I do believe that the co-main event is a sick co-main. You've obviously got big star in Volkanovski, and Aljo is a big star as well. But obviously, I think he may not be the most entertaining, which is why I've chosen him, because I don't think there's much chance that he knocks out Volkanovski. So it's quite a safe matchup for Volk to come back to, but it's also someone who's going to test him, and we're not giving him like a free win like a Bryce Mitchell. But yeah, and then for the featured fight, the reason I've put this on is there wasn't really a clear one that I look at and go, yeah, that's a good featured fight. If that fight wasn't there, you could maybe put Kai Kara France and Steve Usyk up, and then have another fight on the prelims. But I think that it makes a lot of sense to have this fight rebooked, and there was a lot of hype around this fight when it was announced. I actually think more so than there was for Jamal Hill versus Khalil Rountree Jr. You could also have Carlos Ulberg fight Khalil Rountree Jr., but I think this fight makes a lot of sense as the featured fight of the night. Let's get into UFC 306. Okay, main event, Ilia Topuria versus Max Holloway. I think that fight makes loads of sense. Co-main, Sean O'Malley versus Murad Dvalishvili. Featured fight of the night, Alexa Grasso versus Valentina Shevchenko 3. Also on the main card is Charles Oliveira versus Brian Ortega, Yair Rodriguez and Diego Lopez, and then headlining the prelims, I've gone for Anthony Smith versus Dominic Reyes. The prelim headliner I wasn't sure about, because I think that this fight is one I'd like to see. I'm not a fan of Dana saying there's only going to be 10 fights. I'm praying that he slipped up and meant to say we're doing 10 more fights, as in like we've announced, I think they've announced 6 so far, and they meant to say we're doing 10 more, because 10 is not really pay-per-view worthy. Or maybe I think one of them was confirmed after he said 6, so it could be 15, and then do 5 main card, 5 prelims, and 5 early prelims. I can only hope, but let me start at the top with the main event. This isn't just for the featherweight title, this would also be for the BMF belt, because I mean Topuria definitely fits the BMF sort of mantra, I guess. If it was Holloway fighting, obviously not same weight class, but if it was like a Leon Edwards where he doesn't really finish and he's not really got the personality for it, then I would get why you wouldn't put that belt up. But I think that this fight makes a lot of sense, and if Topuria can get it, then I think the winner of this, as ridiculous as it sounds, has the possibility to move up and fight Conor, because I know that Conor wants to fight both of these men and get the BMF belt. I actually think the BMF belt is probably more of a priority for him now than getting a third undisputed belt, because he's already had them, whereas he's never been able to say he's a BMF champion. So I think this is a good fight to make. I don't want this on UFC 307. I think that it's a sort of wasted opportunity if you put it on that card. But yeah, also the co-main event, Sean O'Malley versus Murad Dvalishvili. I've heard a lot of rumours that Topuria and Holloway is going to be on UFC 307, but I'd like to do, I think if they did this, that would just be a sick card, and then it would definitely be worth a hype. And if Dana spent 17 million on going to the Sphere, then you've got to have a big headliner, a big co-main, 3 title fights. I think that makes a lot of sense. There's talks of it just being a fight night, and I don't think he'll be able to make 17 million back on a fight night, and he's not even in September yet. So if you've got, I think they might, I don't know, I reckon there's a possibility that they do Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko 3 as the main event, and just have it be a fight night, but it's not really a very good card. So if you actually watched my old video that I did where I went through the pay-per-views for the year, I said that I wanted this to be I wanted Alexa Grasso and Valentina Shevchenko to main event. I've since gone back on that and thought, you know what, I think that there's far bigger fights, and if they're spending that much money, then you should really have a sick card. If Valentina Shevchenko doesn't want to fight Alexa Grasso, then obviously you could give her Manon. So I don't know, but other than that, Charles Oliveira and Brian Ortega, sick fight. I don't know a single person who wouldn't want to see that. Also, Yair Rodriguez versus Diego Lopez. I think that fight makes a lot of sense and is an absolute banger. Prelim headliner again. Some other fights I was thinking of could be Cody Garbrandt and Raul versus Jr., but they're unranked, so I don't know. These two are former title challengers, so it makes sense. I'm trying to think of other fights that you could add. Obviously, Anthony Hernandez and Michelle Pereira is already confirmed, but yeah, I think that would be a sick card. If we do get 10 fights in, I don't know what they'd do, but yeah, let's go to UFC 307. Alright, so I've had to make a few assumptions here. I reckon, right, my prediction is that Leon Edwards finishes Belal quite early because of how aggressive he was against him in their first fight. So I can actually see Leon, this is like my ideal situation, is that Leon finishes him in the very first round, which is why I've put him on UFC 307, because obviously, you know, if he went, not I'm saying they're going to go to war, but if they went to a close war, then I doubt you would be able to turn around that quickly. But the way I see it, when he fought Colby and didn't take much damage, he was willing to turn around in April to fight in UFC 300. So, you know, July to October's not that bad, but yeah. So Leon Edwards versus Shavkat Rakhmonov, Raquel Pennington versus, I would have done Pennington versus Kayla Harrison, but they look like they're going to do Pena, so we'll go with that. Henry Cejudo versus Jose Aldo, Jack Della Maddalena versus Michael Venom Page. I'll get to that one because it's a bit of an odd one. And then Movsar Evloev versus Lerone Murphy, and then obviously Kayla Harrison versus Macy Chiasson. Right, I will start at the top. Again, like I said, Leon Edwards, let's just assume he finishes Belal quite quickly. And Shavkat, I think he's like behind Belal next in line for the title. There's not really like a clear number one contender. And I would have had him fight JDM in Australia as the featured fight instead of like Jamahal Hill and stuff. But if Leon's ready to fight, I think give Shavkat the title shot. It makes a lot of sense. He's ranked number 3. Leon's beaten number 1 and beaten number 2, and then he also beat number 4, and number 5 was injured. So I think this fight makes a lot of sense. The co-main event, again, like I said, I would have done Kayla Harrison versus Raquel Pennington, but I can see why they would want to do what's her name, Juliana Pena, just because former champion. She's a bigger name than Kayla Harrison, I think, just because she's got those wins over Amanda Nunes. But yeah, and then in the featured fight of the night, I've heard talks of them doing Jose Aldo versus like Kyler Phillips on this card, but I don't see why you'd want to do that. I think it makes more sense to have Aldo move up the ranks, so he could. I mean, I doubt he will get a title shot, but if there's a chance that he can get one. The fact that he beat the number 14 guy and got ranked number 8, I think they're going to try and push him up the rankings as much as they can. And then for Henry Cejudo, it's a good step down in terms of rankings, but it's also a bigger name, so he's not going to be fighting like a Rob Font or something in the Apex. Yeah, and then Jack Della Maddalena versus Michael Venom Page. You might have a lot of questions because you might think, well, MVP just lost to the number 7 ranked guy, so why would we give him the number 5 ranked guy? But there's not really anyone for JDM to fight. You could have him fight Ian Machado Gary and have it be like a number 1 contenders fight, but they want to fight on UFC. Ian wants to fight on UFC 310, and I've got a bigger card for 310 which I'll go over. Again, you could have him fight Kamaru, but I've got Kamaru on a different fight later. Belal would have just been finished. Shavkat's fighting for the title. Number 6, Gilbert Burns, he just beat. Number 7, again, Ian's going to be fighting on 310. Sean Brady would have just fought Gilbert Burns. So there's not really anyone else. The other person I considered would be Stephen Thompson. But I don't know. I think if you do this fight against MVP said he's ready to fight. So that makes a lot of sense. I mean, yeah, I wouldn't. Him or Stephen Wonderboy Thompson wouldn't be bad, but I think because MVP is British, I thought him and Leon and Lerone as well on the same card would be pretty good. With Lerone's fight against Movsar Evloev, I think this is a great fight. I don't think that it's not going to be as entertaining as you would expect, you know, the main card opener to be, but I think it's more entertaining than Aljamain Sterling versus Movsar Evloev. And also, you've got that intrigue of someone's O's got to go. So I think it makes a lot of sense to have on the card. And then prelim headliner, Kayla Harrison versus Macy Chiasson. You could actually put this above Movsar Evloev and Lerone Murphy, but yeah. Alright, let's go to UFC 308. Main event, Islam Makhachev versus Arman Tsarukyan. Co-main event, Jared Cannonier versus Khamzat Chimaev. Featured fight, Gane versus Volkov. Main card, Kevin Holland versus Sharon Magomedov. Main card opener, Ikram Alaskarov versus Paul Craig. And then the prelim headliner, Saeed Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. Right, main event, I've gone for Islam, obviously. I know he said he wants to fight in MSG, but I think this card needs a headliner. I would have maybe considered putting Alex as the headliner to this card, but Alex has said that he is unable to fight in October. The earliest he could do is maybe November, but December is. He said no. He said December would be ideal, but that's obviously I think will go to Connor. And then so I've put Alex on the November card, and then we've got Islam on the Abu Dhabi card versus Arman Tsarukyan. It's a great fight. I personally would root for Islam Makhachev. I think he gets it done. I think he could finish Arman, to be fair, but they've both come along since their last fight, since they first fought. Co-main event, Jared Cannonier and Khamzat Chimaev. I actually think that this is a great fight, and I think it makes a lot of sense for both men, really, because I don't think Chimaev deserves a fight just yet at like the top of the top 5, if that makes sense. So like against like a Sean Strickland, or obviously Izzy would have just fought, Dricus would have just fought, Robert Whittaker. I don't think he quite deserves that fight yet, and I think that Sean and Robert could end up fighting. But the reason I've put him against Jared Cannonier is I think it makes a lot of sense to build Jared Cannonier's star, if that makes sense. As in, he's not a particularly big name, but this fight should boost him and his levels of popularity, similar to how it did when Khamzat fought Gilbert Burns. And I think Cannonier's got quite an entertaining style, so it would be quite good for Chimaev to be able to like build Cannonier's style and have a good entertaining fight. So I considered putting him against a Marvin Vettori, because I know Vettori can sort of sell. I mean, I wouldn't say he sells the fight, but he does try and talk in the press conference, and I don't think Jared Cannonier does as much. But I thought, you know what, Chimaev sort of sells on his own, and this card is good enough that I can see a lot of people buying it. So I thought, you know what, I'll put him against Jared Cannonier, build Jared's star as well. The featured fight, I would have had this main event in Paris. I know that they want to give Benoit Saint Denis a chance and then build his star as well, but I don't know. I don't think that there's much intrigue in this matchup. Correct me if I'm wrong. I would rather have seen. I don't know if Volkov has fought Sergey Spivak. I will check, but I would have rather have seen Volkov versus Sergey Spivak. I know it's not a very entertaining fight, but then you have what's his name? Then you can have Gane versus Tybura on this card, or you know, there's different matchups. I'm not so keen on the rematch idea. I don't like that they're rematching, but it should be a good number 1 contenders fight. And then obviously the winner can fight Tom Aspinall. Well, I mean, I would say Jones, but I don't think Jones is gonna fight Gane again or fight Volkov. So also, Tom's the real champion, I can't lie. Tom should be the undisputed champion at the moment. Right, then Kevin Holland versus Sharon Magomedov. This fight, great fight. I know that Dana's talking, I know there was some talks about it headlining like UFC Denver or something. I'm not sure, but I do think this fight makes a lot of sense. And it's a good step up in competition for both guys, really, because Kevin Holland obviously just fought Olajaychik, so not the highest level of competition, so I think it makes a lot of sense for him to fight another up-and-coming contender. But then for Sharaputin Magomedov, it would be good for him to finally be tested a bit, And obviously Kevin Holland is sort of the litmus test. If you beat him, you're good enough for the top 15, and if you lose to him, then you're probably not quite there. Like sort of where Roman Kopylov is right now, that's sort of your level. If you look at the main card opener, similar sort of thing. Ikram Alaskarov got thrown in at the deep end, so if he's able to beat Paul Craig, which I think he can do quite easily because Paul's got no stand-up, but if he's able to beat Paul Craig, then I think he could definitely sort of build his way back up. And it's not, because he's got a bigger name now. I don't think there's much point in putting him up against like Ihor Potiera, or I think that's his name, but I don't know. There's no point in putting him against someone like him who has no name. I think Paul Craig he's got some good wins on his resume. Like when you think he's beaten Ankalaev, he's beaten Jamal Hill. Like he's got some pretty good names on his resume, and I know he's a bit of a one-trick pony, but I think that fight makes a lot of sense as a good sort of gauge to where Ikram actually is, because he's no Wally Alves or whatever his name is, but he's definitely not Robert Whittaker. And then to headline the prelims, this is a great fight. Said Nurmagomedov versus Vinicius Oliveira. Like, it's just a good scrap, isn't it? I think this would be a great fight to headline the prelims. Yeah, right, let's go to UFC 309. John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. Co-main event, Alex Pereira versus Magomed Ankalaev. Featured fight, Kamaru Usman versus Joaquin Buckley. Main card, Anthony Smith versus Artem Vakhitov. Main card opener, Bo Nickel versus Rodolfo Vieira. And then the prelim headliner, Derek Lewis versus Alexander Romanov. Right, let's address the elephant in the room. John Jones versus Stipe Miocic. I mean, there's probably more elephants, to be fair, but this is not my ideal main event. What if I could change how the UFC would run? I would probably do Jones versus Aspinall as the main event, and then have Pereira fight Miocic, similar to how Conor McGregor was able to fight Nate Diaz, 2 weight classes above, just on the fly. So I think, obviously, I know he didn't mean to, and that wasn't like their plan, but he's just like, Alex is at a point where he's a big enough star that he should be able to fight in different weight classes, obviously, as a champion. And then this could be a good number 1 contenders fight, and the winner would take on either John or Tom for the undisputed belt. I do get that obviously leaves Magomed Ankalaev in a bit of a difficult situation, but you know what, chuck a interim title on the fight before, have him fight, I don't know, who would be a good fight, or the winner of Allberg and Hill if they're able to turn around that quickly, or maybe what's the guy's name, Volkan Oezdemir possibly, since he just beat Johnny Walker. But yeah, there's a few different options. If we look at the featured fight, there's some people who might say, Joaquin Buckley doesn't deserve to be in there with the likes of Kamaru Usman, and Usman should fight someone more like Shavkat or JDM or someone. But I actually think that, yeah, you're right, Joaquin Buckley doesn't deserve to be in there, which is why I've given Usman this fight. Look, I think Usman has had 3 tough fights back to back. He's fought Leon Edwards twice, and then he fought Shavkat on 2 weeks' notice. So I think it would be quite fair if we gave him a step down in competition, and look, just give him not a free win, but like someone he should be able to beat. And look, for Joaquin Buckley, if he's able to beat the greatest active welterweight in UFC, the second greatest welterweight in UFC history, who's still active today, that's earned him a title shot, I believe. So I think that this would be a great fight for both guys. And for Usman, I can just see him putting on like an absolute clinic, a 3-round war, and like he just dominates him 30-27, maybe even 30-26, chuck a couple 10-8s in there. Like, I'm talking Ilia Topuria versus Josh Emmett level of like beat down, but obviously across 3 rounds instead. And then if Joaquin Buckley can knock out, well, not a knockout, but if he can beat Kamaru Usman, then fair play. Like, Kamaru's still got it. He was still able to fight with, put on a good performance against Hamzat, and Leon as well, to be fair. But yeah, right. Also on the main card, I've gone for Anthony Smith and Artem Vakhitov. You may not know Artem Vakhitov, but he was the last guy to beat Alex Pereira in kickboxing. Now, I know that I had Anthony Smith fight fairly recently on 306, but he was able to turn around after like a month of fighting Vitor Petrino, so I think he can do 2 months. 2 months isn't too bad, considering he's now fighting someone like lower. Well, he's now fighting someone unranked, so as long as he doesn't get his head caved in by Dominic Reyes, I think this is a possible fight. And look, Artem is fighting on Dana White's Contender Series, I think in like either August or September, so this will be a great fight. And look, I'm putting Artem against someone in the top. I think we should give him like the Michael Chandler or like MVP type treatment, where he's obviously proven that he has striking. We know he's a great kickboxer, so we could slowly build him like they did with Alex Pereira, where they didn't just chuck him in straight away, and they sort of gave him a few fights first. But I feel like if you do that and then he loses, well, then it's like, alright, well, you sort of ruin that opportunity. And Anthony Smith is one of those people that is a bit of a litmus test. Like I said, if you beat him, you're ready for the top 15, and if you don't, then maybe you shouldn't have been put into that fight. A bit like Vitor Petrino. But yeah, for the main card opener, obviously, Bo Nichols said he wants to fight on this card. I'm a bit surprised he didn't want to fight on 310. I originally would have had him fight on 306 against Anthony Hernandez, but you know, Rodolfo Vieira is, I think he's 10-2, but he's got a lot of BJJ experience, so great jiu-jitsu. I think it makes a lot of sense to have him fight. I think this is also a rumoured fight as well, so yeah, it's a great grappling test for him. And for Derek Lewis versus Alexander Romanov, I just wanted to give Derek Lewis a free win because he's a funny guy. And you know what, this could actually be one of Derek Lewis's first submission wins. I think it is his first in the UFC if he was able to get one, because Romanov just gets so gassed out and he's so chubby that like he's such a blob and he has like level 1 cardio. So I think that Derek Lewis could honestly submit him, and just I think he gets so tired that he'd either knock him out or submit him in the first round. Right, UFC 310. Main event, Conor McGregor versus Michael Chandler. Co-main event, Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier 3. Featured fight of the night, Sean Strickland versus Robert Whittaker. Main card, we've also got Tony Ferguson versus Dylan Dennis, which I'll get to. And opening the main card, Colby Covington versus Ian Machado Gary. And then headlining the prelims, Jailton Almeida versus Johnny Walker. Right, let me talk to you guys about this card. This is a strategical play by me, okay? Because I believe in 2024, the UFC's deal with ESPN runs out. So, the reason why I've done this is I think if the UFC is able to say, like, look how many trash talkers we have on this card. We've got Conor, who beefs with Poirier, Sean Strickland, who beefs with Colby, Ian. Dylan Dennis is there, so he's going to beef with anyone. Him and Tony, I can imagine, have a bit of a back and forth. Robert Whittaker's kind of just there for the lulz. Same with Justin Gaethje, they don't really have beef. But look, you've got all these different people. Michael Chandler and Dustin Poirier don't get on. Like, you just got a bunch, like, Dylan Dennis will have a field day with Ian Machado Gary. So it makes a lot of sense to have these guys fighting each other. And the reason that they would want to have a card like this, if they can break pay-per-view records before they have to sign a new deal with another broadcasting network, then they can say, look, we've got the biggest star in combat sports, we just did the biggest pay-per-view in combat sports. I'm not saying this would necessarily do the biggest pay-per-view, because I don't think they can really top Habib and Conor, but if they're able to come close to it, then they can say, look, we've had a record-breaking year, we had International Fight Week, which was the highest grossing event of all time, and now we've also got UFC 310, which could have possibly broken that record with an even better card. And I don't think they'll do really bad McGregor cards anymore, because you know, the risk of him pulling out is now a thing. Like before, it was like, well, Conor always shows up, he's never pulled out of a single fight, so I was confident he was going to turn up. So I think that makes a lot of sense to have a card like this. Let me go through each fight, I'll give you some predictions. I'll start at the bottom. Almeida versus Walker. The reason I've done this fight, I think that obviously Johnny Walker's talked about moving up to heavyweight, and I debated giving him, I literally wrote down Shamil Kassif as his opponent. I debated just giving him a random blob, but I thought, you know what, let me give him someone in the top 15, and then if he can't beat them, then he could obviously fight an unranked heavyweight. I think this would make a lot of sense, because if I look at the top 15, Tom Aspinall, no, he's not going to fight him. If I move down a bit, you know, he's not going to fight anyone in the top 5. Everyone else in the top 10 is pretty risky. Stipe would have just fought. Who else have we got? If I look at the lower half of the top 15, Derek Lewis, no. Jairzinho Rosenstrike would have fought earlier this year. I don't know how active he is, but even then, it's not really. You know, you don't want to fight these big punchers when you've just moved up and you've not got the greatest chin. So Jailton Almeida, I think he's only got 2 knockout wins in the UFC. He's got 7 in total. That's not, you know, an amazing number. If we look at Derek Lewis, let me see what he's got. Derek Lewis has got 23 wins by knockout. So it's not really someone we want to have fight it. Like, we don't want to put him up against a big power puncher if he's not got the best chin. So I think it's a good fight. Shamil Ghaziv has actually got more knockout wins than Jailton Almeida, which is a fun fact for you guys. If we look at let's go to the main card opener. So Colby and Ian Gary, I originally had as the co-main, and then I thought, you know what, let me make Gaethje and Poirier 5 rounds. So I thought, why not, you know? And also, Colby and Ian, I have a feeling this is going to be a boring fight. Like, if you look at their last 2 performances, Colby looks stiff, and Ian Gary just went for takedowns. It might, I mean, Colby's obviously going to want to wrestle, Ian's going to want to strike, so it might bring a good side out of Ian, but Colby didn't really do much last time, and he, you know, you'd want to strike more against Leon Edwards than you would against Ian Gary, so I don't know, but this fight's purely on the card to beef with other people and to build a bit of hype. I've just thought of something else as well. If we look at the next fight, Tony Ferguson versus Dylan Dennis, Tony could even beef a bit with Sean Strickland because Tony trains with, or trained with, I don't know if he still does, with David Goggins, so he might have him in his corner for this fight. So yeah, Tony versus Dylan Dennis. A lot of people might think, well, why have you signed Dylan Dennis to the UFC? I can imagine them saying, look, we want to see if you can beat Tony Ferguson, then we want to sign you. So if you can win this one fight, we can talk about other offers. And then look, if he beats Tony Ferguson, that's a good first win, to be fair, in the UFC. And I know that he's not got the greatest reputation after the Logan Paul fight, but look, just try and get, like, it's just a big name to for Tony to be able to fight. We're not giving him like some random unranked lightweight that he's probably going to lose to. This fight would be at welterweight. I feel like the problem with him versus Michael Chiesa is I can actually imagine him losing. So it's not someone that I wouldn't have put him against Michael Chiesa. Him versus Nick Diaz is a better fight. But look, I think it makes a lot more sense to have someone like Dylan Dennis who's going to bring an audience, and you know, it's a good first fight for him. He's on a card with people that he gets on with, like Conor. So yeah, he's not going to be training. It's not like I put him on that Abu Dhabi card where he's going to be, you know, on a card with random Dagestanis that don't like him. He's going to be with people that he gets on, like, not well with, obviously, because it's Dylan Dennis, but, you know, and also fighting in the US. There's a chance they might even cheer him. I don't think they would, but yeah. Featured fight, Sean Strickland versus Robert Whittaker, #1 contenders fight. Again, having Sean on here, it should be a good way to build a pay-per-view and get people talking. His fights aren't actually that interesting, but I'm hoping that Robert Whittaker's sort of blitzing forward style will make it more appealing to fans, because if we look at Sean's fight against Dricus, whenever Dricus would close the distance, it made for quite an entertaining fight. So I think this fight makes more sense than Strickland versus Costa did. Now, I actually would have had this fight be on the UFC 302 card and then have Paulo Costa fight Hamza Chimaev instead, but look, they didn't do that, so I think this would be a good featured fight. You could maybe swap this with Ian and Colby, but I think this is a more entertaining fight, and they're 2 former champions, whereas Colby's just an interim champion and Ian hasn't really got any accolades to the name. But yeah, if you look at the co-main event, Justin Gaethje versus Dustin Poirier 3, this is a great fight. If you don't want to see this fight, then I think you're wrong in the head. But like, think about, if we look at some of the fights before it, Almeida versus Walker, Almeida's a bit boring. Johnny Walker, it's just a highlight reel, so he could get slept, but he might be worried about getting slept at heavyweight, I don't know. Colby versus Ian, probably could be boring. Tony Ferguson versus Dylan Dennis could be boring. Dylan didn't really throw much against Logan, so it wouldn't shock me. Sean versus Robert could be boring. You know, you've not got a great main card, but this co-main event is guaranteed to not be boring. There's no way that these two don't, either one of them's getting knocked out or they're producing the fight of the year. And I think this would be a great fight to have. both men have just been finished in their last performances around the same time, so it's not like someone's just been finished. Like if Volk fought right after the Makachev loss to like someone who got slept a year before, you know, Volk's chin is going to be more compromised, so I think it makes more sense to have two guys who sort of lost at a similar time. For Poirier, if he's able to win and go out on a win, then he would have beat the guy who sort of, I know that he said he had a few issues after the second Justin Gaethje loss, because he got head kicked and he was like, look, that was a bit shit, I've just got knocked out. I don't know, has Poirier been knocked out before? Oh, I think he probably has when he's that younger. There's probably a few times that I can't really think of, but I can't imagine that would have been, if he'd won that, he would have got right back into title sort of contention. So for him, I think he definitely would want to get this one back. I think they named 7 people that he might want to fight. I think it was on Ariel Helwani's show, and Justin was one of the 7 people. So I think that makes a lot of sense. And you've also got him who he could beef with, like Colby, Conor, Michael Chandler, probably Dylan Dennis as well, because he loves Conor. But yeah, and then obviously for Justin, this could actually end up being a double retirement fight. If Justin chooses to go out, if he wins, but I mean, like, he's had a few rough performances. If you look at the Max Holloway fight, that wasn't good. So yeah, right, main event. I think this is one of the more obvious main events of this year if Conor actually shows up, but I can definitely see his headlining 310. My only worry is that they won't do a stacked card like this, but I think, you know what, they need that incentive for streaming companies like Netflix or Amazon to say, look, we've just done this many pay-per-views, we've got John Jones, we've got Conor, we've got all these big stars, we've got Islam, we've got Alex, Izzy could be a champion, so we've got all these big stars, Sean O'Malley, Max Holloway, like the list goes on. If they've got all of that in 1 year, then I think they'd want to do a big pay-per-view to end it off. And normally December, November pay-per-views are pretty big. They don't always deliver, and I think this one would under-deliver, just because you've got a few like boring fighters like Sean Strickland, Colby, Ian. But the main event, like Michael Chandler is not in. I don't think he's had a single boring UFC fight. Same with Justin and Dustin as well. And to be fair, McGregor, as long as he's not being wrestled, he's never too tentative. But yeah, I think this will be a great card. And let me know what you guys thought of every other event this year. I hope you guys did end up watching this on 2x speed. It's a bit late for me to say that now, but hopefully you haven't sat through like half an hour of me yapping away. But yeah, peace, love and guidance. I'm out.